you've rang the wrong person, haven't you? And I could hear her flicking, and she went, I have. I've called the wrong agency. But we got on so well, I'm going to let you pitch. And I was like, that's wicked. And then we pitched and we won.
So welcome to the Who's Elvis Round Here podcast. This is where I get to hang out with some very cool people, leaders who are renowned for creativity, for energy, for shaking things up and getting the best out of their people. And this week I am joined by an old mate of mine, Dr. Mark Fowlestone. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Chris. It's a joy. It's a joy to see you in one of my most favourite rooms that you inhabit.
Yeah, you've been here before. This is this place where magic's happened.
Always does. And you're sitting or are you standing?
I am sitting. Admittedly, I'm on a very high stool, but I am sitting.
Right.
Yeah. Making myself comfortable for you. Oh. Ready for wherever the conversation goes.
Well, it's going to go anywhere, isn't it? It's going to go everywhere.
It certainly is. So, look, for those people who don't know you, Mark, can you give us a bit of background? Who are you?
So I'm Mark Fowlestone, and I come from the northwest of England, a little place called Morecambe, an old seaside town, and I hold it passionately. I grew up there in the tough, mean streets of the 80s, and I think that was a part of me that I hold today. Maybe I've got a chip on my shoulder about coming from somewhere like that. But from there, I went to Sheffield. I went to university in Sheffield. And then I went down to London and I worked within the Ogilvy organization, which was fantastic, brilliant training, exceptional standards and brilliant creative. And then from there, I moved within the Havas organization and ended up becoming MD of one of their companies. And then 20 years ago, which seems a long time ago, really.
Wow.
I must have been about 8 when I went to uni. But then I started my own thing called Multiply. And this has been 20 years of real joy doing it for yourself. I hadn't realized. I always thought that you couldn't do it for yourself. But actually, it just takes one step, doesn't it? And then things happen. And when you throw your heart and soul into it, it happened. I came together with a bunch of mates, all different, which was really important. And then we started this beautiful journey, and you'll find us making TV ads for Quality Meat Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland. You'll even find us under the shadow of the pyramids inventing new biscuits for Pladis.
Wow.
So our output is many varied, and it's been great. I come in every day. There's no need to, but I love coming in, and we've provided successful lives for many people, probably over 350 people in the time that we've been around, and people seem to enjoy and hark back to how they enjoyed hanging with us. So that's where I am. Yeah, and I live in Edinburgh now, and I kind of call it my home. I've probably been here in Scotland more than I've been in England, but. Yeah. So that's me, Chris.
Lovely. And look, obviously, we've bonded over the years through mainly through kind of creativity and doing things differently and following our passions and our energy. So, so we're a lovely little Venn diagram that overlap beautifully, I would say, which is why I was delighted to have you on.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I remember the times of when you were at Bass Brewers that became Coors, and you were one of the starlets of their drinks world, and then you left there to go to What If, and I think you taught me there the ideals of change, but also the skills that What If had. They were a brilliant company, and probably still are a brilliant company, but their principles on activating the mind and opening up the possibilities, I think, that you shared with me, I think set me up in many ways. So I have to thank you many times for your professional insight. So as well as being a top bloke.
Well, I'll take that happily. Well, we've had some fine adventures. So talking of fine adventures, now I know you can spin a good yarn, Mark. So what is the story that you love to tell that people love to hear?
Well, I mean, if I was to say what's my job, I would probably say that people would probably say he just talks all the time, yeah, and I do try and avoid stories that have like a bad placed sort of cultural relevance. Like I was at this isn't the story I'm going to tell you, by the way, but I was at a workshop, and I was asking everybody, where do you come from? And one of the attendees said, I'm from Vienna. And I went, I'm sorry, that means nothing to me. Yeah. And nobody laughed. Nobody laughed, right? And then afterwards, one of the older crew said, you need to change your cultural reference points. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Um, so yeah, a story that I keep repeating, I
Love
think,
it.
time and time again. I think that the kind of the key things that I try to do in my job is make sure that people understand it's so important to remain human, to remain who you are. I think is absolutely critical, and I think also to ride your luck. Yeah, so luck happens. It's really weird luck, but it happens. Yeah, and when you ride it, you take it, and I think that's really important. And the final thing is always have empathy with people. Yeah, and empathy, if you're in a if you're in a marketing job or a brand job, empathy is about your consumers, but also those around you. And I think if you understand people, then that's brilliant. And understanding them, at the heart of it is empathy. And the yarn I'm going to tell you is about. So I was in the office, and everyone had gone out. Every single person had left the office, and I was at my desk playing online gaming. Yeah, and so next thing I hear the phone's ringing, and I was kind of disturbed. So I went and picked up the phone, and I went, "Hey, how's it going?" It was actually the main reception phone, which normally would have been, "Hi, you're through to Multiply. How can I help you, etc." It's like, "Hi," and the girl on the other end went, "Oh, sorry, sorry," and we turned out she was a major client at a cheese company. So we
Right.
spoke for the next 45 minutes all about cheese. I never realized I knew so much about cheese. We talked about the retail environment, we talked about dietary changes, talked about everything, yeah. And we got on really well. It was really lovely. And, I was a little bit embarrassed at the start because I'd kind of answered the phone in as if I was like lying on my sofa. But, and she says, "Look, we've had such a great conversation. I'm going to ask you to pitch." And I was like, "Oh, that's really wicked. That's so kind." And then she said, "So just to get the details right, so I can get everything there, you're from," and named another agency. And I went, "You've rang the wrong person, haven't you?" And I could hear her flicking, and she went, "I have. I've called the wrong agency. But we got on so well, I'm going to let you pitch." And I was like, "That's wicked." And then we pitched, and we won. And this client became a really good client for a number of years. And it was that, so what I try and tell people is, you just always have empathy with people. And when luck happens, ride
Yeah.
that luck. So it was lucky that we took that call, lucky that I answered it in the way. But that luck then embodied itself in the whole pitch process. There was a story to tell,
That's
it was,
fantastic.
and so yeah, and we won the pitch, and it was great. And so I tell that too many times. And normally when people come into the business, and when I'm trying to kind of just show them the way of dealing with people is really important. I remember my old boss, when I was really young. I took a call from a client who said, "I'm leaving on Friday." I was like, "Oh, leaving?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm going to another job. Can you give me the budget?" I says, "Right, well, there's two budgets that we've been working to. There's one which is the advertising and one which is the staffing." And she said, "No, no, it's one. I always told you it was one." I said, "Well, it's actually two." And she goes, "Well, I could just leave and say that the staffing budget was nothing I knew about, and then you wouldn't get paid." I said, "You could do that, but karma will hit you, right?" And then she put the phone
Yeah, yeah,
down,
yeah.
and she put the phone down on me. And then next thing, my boss called me through, and he said, "Mark, you can't talk to people like that, right? You've got to understand that she's probably saying that because she's made a mistake or whatever. And you try and work it through together." I was like, "I'm really sorry. I'm fresh in. I just didn't get it." And then about 8 years later, my old boss rang me up, and I'd moved on and he'd moved on, and he had a passing resemblance to me. And he went into this new business meeting, and the girl there said, "I know you. You were the one that was really rude to me years ago. Leave." And then he rang me up and said,
Wow.
"You've just caused me to lose." So yeah, having empathy and understanding people's perspectives, I think, is something that I try to communicate.
Well, it sounds like you learnt the lesson, and then since then, when you've been doing late night gaming, you're just there
That's
to
it.
catch it, which is
That's
perfect.
it. Yeah.
I love it. I love it when there was that realization that she'd phoned you by accident. That is just class.
I know, yeah. I mean, she'd obviously just drawn a list up of different agencies and wrote ours down by mistake. But, and I think that that broke down all the future barriers. We'd bonded at a different level. I didn't know that she was a client or anything. I just thought, oh, this is really interesting. Let's talk cheese.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that was
Let's
it.
get into it. so look, obviously, when you are doing your work, you've got lots of great people that you work with lots of
Yeah.
clients. You've got a nice touch for people. So,
Yeah.
what's the single most important thing about bringing the genius out of people?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really complex. There are so many possibilities in the way that you can bring out, but I think for me, the thing that I try to give people is space. Yeah, probably space and permission. Space to make mistakes, investigate new areas, take chances, as long as there's standards. So there's certain standards that we expect,
Sure.
in terms of performance, being safe with each other, all of those other things. The language that we use, etc., is really important. But within that, you've got to give people space and allow them. And when they feel comfortable in their own space, as it were, that's when I think the magic comes out. I think that I go back to being a northerner. You always, you consume all the northern books, when you're a kid, and one that sticks out is actually probably 19th century, called The Manchester Man. It's a really interesting book. It's a study of how a boy changes through life and becomes successful and grows, but also it reflects how Manchester has grown over that period as well and change. And I think that what's really important is that wherever we are, the world will change. You can't have fixed things, and have
Sure.
to accept that what's really important in those period of changes is when people leave an impression, a story, an imprint. And I think that's a really important thing, is that when you give people space, it allows them to put their own impression down. And I think that's the thing that remains. When I look back at, the over 350 people that have come through these doors, the ones that the people that I really remember, of those that have left impressions, little echoes around the place. And that's all been from giving them space to bring their own self into the business.
So I'm a massive fan of space, and it's something that a lot of people really are challenged with creating, just because,
Yeah.
with the way that tech is and with constant demands on our attention, back to backs, all that kind of stuff, they find it very hard. And I'm asked about this quite often. So what are your top tips on how you create space for your company and your people?
I mean, people these days are shackled by process, and particularly in our industry, margins are so tight, and then everybody gets every system in. We need to capture every hour. Every hour's got to be allocated to a client. Yeah, and I get that. But I find that you can do that at a basic level, but you have to give space available for people. So it's not about delivering 7.5 hours against a client. You've got to think, well, 50% of your time you're administrating, you're doing stuff efficiently. The other 50% of the time, investigate, try new things, look at other
Yeah.
opportunities. You're dealing with on a certain project. What's next? Have a think, and I think that you just have to, accept that technology makes us more efficient, but it can't take away our humanity and our personality. And we have to allow space to do that, which is difficult because, ultimately, nobody's in no industry at the moment. They're saying we got loads of time. Like when I started in the Ogilvy network, it was 9 months before you're effectively allowed to see a client. And what you were doing in that 9 months was learning everything about the potential client that you were going on to. So when I went into my first meeting, which was a supermarket chain, I knew everything about it. Yeah. So I'd just gone in there and had found out everything. There is tragically there is no scope for that anymore.
No.
But what there can be in your daily life is, you know what you've got to deliver. There's a system there to help you, but how you get there, make it fluid, make it flexible. If you want to work at home, go and work at home for a few days. If you want to
Sure.
come in late. If you've got other stuff to do, fine. As long as there's the standards that are the kind of bedrock of it all, then just allow people the fluidity. And I think that is good. It can be dangerous because people may manipulate that, but that rocks out. But in the main, I think if you allow that freedom of expression, then that's when stuff really happens for people and us as well.
Yeah, and it's refreshing to hear because so many agencies are all about utilization levels. That's what it's about, and they're just trying to max out the cash, and they forget that the people they're working with are human. And actually, we're not all about delivering maximum number of hours that add value all the time. We need some time to rest, to reflect, to get stimulus, to play, to get lost, get things wrong. All of that's vital, right, to do good work.
Yeah, it is, and I think that. I remember going, we pitched for a client many, many years ago. And the way that we got there was one of the boys in the office said, I was down at IKEA and I found this a really amazing thing. And I decided to build this unit, right? And I think this unit could really be part of their marketing. And I was like, that is absolutely crazy. So I rang up the client and I says, look, you don't know me from Adam, right? I'm just a guy in an agency. But one of the boys has built this mental thing. Can I come and show you it? And I took it along and he says, I tell you what, it's not what we're looking for, but I've never been approached by somebody that's taken the time to think about our brand, that's not employed by us and bring us something really wild. He said, you're going to pitch for our business next, which was really good.
Cool.
But if you didn't give people that space to, ultimately what he did was not right for the time. But he showed that he's always thinking, he had an idea, he brought it to life, he made it real, and it became a talking point, like in their office, they were like, who's brought this crazy thing into the office?
Always to be remembered though,
That's it.
And that's where the magic often comes. It's not, when you're on a tight timeline with a process and there's a deliverable coming up. It's when actually we can get to play around the edges a little bit. And that's how humans love to create.
That's it. And I think that's when, particularly in our world, clients build bonds with you, because if all of your relationship is based on deliverables and timescales and meeting them, then that becomes the premise of your relationship. Whereas if you've got chance to bring a bit of humanity into it, a bit of fresh thinking, an approach of what if we do this, what if we do that? If you don't have the space to be able to do that, then all your relationship is based on is a transactional feel, which... and you fall out of love, so
you really do. My favorite clients phone me up out of the blue and they go, I've got this problem, and it's not a brief, it's not something I should be paid for, but they just want us to bounce it around, and I love that stuff because often we can add value very, very quickly. You don't want it to be something you have to invoice, you want to just do it as part of the love and the relationship, right? And that fluidity, and by the way, I can then phone them up and do the same thing, which is the way a relationship should be, right?
Yeah, I think as sort of a slight adjunct to that is a friend of mine is an architect, and he'll spend his time doing architect stuff, which is unless you're doing something really interesting, is pretty ordered, structured, business-like work. And he does it, and he's pretty bored of it, and he's like, oh, I need to maybe change. And then he gets a call out the blue, and this guy's like saying the laws on fast cremations are changing. We need to think about mausoleums. How do we do fast track mausoleums? It is the greatest brief he's ever been given in his life, and he absolutely loves it. And it's like, he said, I was thinking of changing my world, and my world changed around me, and I just can't, so yeah, it's
you can't see that one coming, can you?
You can't. No. Mausoleums, cremations, putting the fun in funerals, it's all there.
That's a brief to get into. Well, another friend of mine is in the process of reinventing death. He's realised there's a big opportunity there, as it's so Victorian in the way we think about it. So that's a chat for another day, but interesting area.
Yes.
So you work with loads of businesses. You have seen all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Is there one thing that you see in traditional business that really gets your goat?
I think that if I was to ponder that, I think it would be this idea of culture. Um, Culture, when people talk about their cultural identity, it seems really retrospective. It seems fixed. It feels like it's in a framework. Yeah. This is our culture and this is how we operate and all of that kind of stuff. And I really don't like that phrase. And I see it as a permanent. So you've got to fit the culture. For me, it's always been about energy. Yeah, and it's about the energy of a place, not the necessarily the culture of the place. It's how people are. So we had somebody come in for an interview recently, and I heard the bell go, and they were in reception, and they were like, hanging with a couple of people that were working in reception, and then I took him into the meeting room, and he goes, I don't want to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I absolutely love the vibe as I've walked in. And I think for me, that's what it should be. It's not about a cultural template. It's about people just bringing energy. And I think that the more that people kind of, the people that have really done well here and have brought something to the party, of those that have come in each day and shown up what they're about. Yeah. And they've brought their own, like just before I came in to talk to you, there was absolute raucous howlings and stuff like that. And that's, for me, is about the energy of a place rather than a prescriptive template that people should follow. So when people talk to me about their culture, I find that even though I know what they're saying, it still jars me.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it is often very static and it is retrospective. And so what you're saying really resonates. I also don't think it exists in a business. So I don't think they have a culture. I think they have lots of cultures because every team's different. And this kind of one size fits all, this is the direction we're in, I find incredibly limiting. So I like it's about energy because it ultimately is. And it is palpable. When you do walk into a place like Multiply, you can feel it, and if it's buzzy and it's a place that attracts you or not.
Yes.
And the best businesses have a certain resonance about them, which is quite special to who they are.
And it goes back to that first point I was making, which is that energy is really weird in that it leaves a print over time. Yeah, it's always there. So we were yesterday. We were harking back to some of the people that had been here, and you just, they come alive again. You remember them, how they did their job. The fun that we had with them, and that's just lying around the place constantly. Their energy is still here, and I think that what you're trying to do over time is build that energy. Fill it with all the stories from the past, the people from the past. They may have come and they may have gone, like most people do in organizations. But if they've left a little print, a little bubble, a little story somewhere, then, I like that, rather than trying to package it up as a definition of who we are, signs on the wall and things like that. It's not that for me. It's a feel. I don't know if that makes sense.
I like the layers.
Yeah,
what you're describing is the layers of people and experiences over time, and they do build, and that is what gives you something that's very much unique to who you are in your business. So I think we could do a couple of hours on this one, Mark. This is a meaty subject. We
could, and it's also not necessarily the fun and the mad stories, but it's also the failures that people have had as well. The people that have tried something and it's not worked, and all of that. It's like when one of the exercises I do in innovation is saying to people, look, you've been innovating for the last 10 years, right? And there was loads of failures, and please don't see them as failures. See them as stimulus for the next step forward. Let's have a look at them all. There must have been some magic in there. Somebody liked what it was, but it failed at the time. Maybe you didn't have a factory in, or there wasn't a supplier, or there wasn't a this, that, and the other, or changing habits have changed. But don't treat the past as the past. There's always something bubbling through that you can grab onto.
Yes. Yes, in full agreement on that one, Mark. Now, look,
Nice.
I've hung out with you a lot in many, many places, in lots of different
Yeah.
contexts, and you're always a very positive chap.
Oh,
What is it that gives you? What is it that gives you hope, Mark?
hope's a funny thing, really. Um, and I've had some heated discussions with my partner Fiona about this because there's something about hope which I find as a bit nebulous, a bit like, it will happen. And there's also the kind of religious part of it, which doesn't kind of gel with me. But
Sure.
I think that hope is about now. It's up to you to do stuff now. If you're present and you're making stuff happen with a positive outlook, then things will happen for you. And it's really hard to think about, I hope something will happen because things change every single day. I mean, I've suddenly become addicted to the news, right? It's like, oh, what's going to happen, or like, oh, what's AI going to do to us today? So the world is changing beyond belief. I mean, my wee boy's 10. Will he go to university? Will university be still around? I wouldn't, I'm not going to name a place, but I wouldn't go there for 4 years in the UK. I'd want to do a little bit here and a course over in America online or whatever. So everything changes. But for me, hope is really you'll make the outcomes you want if you focus on today. You focus on yourself, you get yourself grounded, and you turn up. And if you do that, then the positive things that you always hope for will happen. If I was to say one thing, it would probably be a hope for the human aspects of our world in our working world to remain constant. I don't think that we should. We're born natural communicators. We're born in groups. We want to communicate, tell stories, have fun,
Yeah.
fall out, have fights, make up. And I think that I hope that we can keep that within this technological world that's keeping us all entrapped in our houses and on our computers, that we can just go and meet people, solve problems together. And I hope that that still remains part of the model that technology's got for us. Um,
Yeah. Well, me too. And that is, I still think, where all the magic comes.
it
And look,
does.
tech's an enabler, but it will never replace that. They never will.
I've got myself into
I
too many
also,
troubles not being understood, whereas we'll sit down together and everything. Works out well. So yeah, that the critical part of it is that.
yeah, I agree. I remember some time ago you decided you're having 3 consecutive years. One, the year of the body, and you got mega fit, and then
Yeah,
the mind, you became a doctor, and then it
yeah,
was of the spirit, as I recall. And actually, your
yeah.
last point about presence, it just had a little resonance there of your final
Oh,
year.
yeah,
Because there's something very profound about, in business, we spend half our time planning, thinking ahead, always do. But
yeah.
actually, unless you are there now, accessing the people, your genius, your energy, then none of that really matters. So this presence bit really resonates with me.
It does, and I think it's really important in business because there seems to be so much fluidity in business as well. People moving. One of the things I really find difficult is working with a lot of organizations where people are maybe only there 1 year, 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that
yeah.
making plans for 2 years and 5 years is, yeah, shareholders require that. All of that's really important. But none of that's going to happen unless everybody's in it together, in the present, feeling it. And that can turn things into success, not an ambition that's way out there that actually 9/10 of the room are not even going to be there. They're gone. You know, they're probably
Yeah,
working for your
they
competitors.
will be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
focus on now with an idea of where you want to be. But it's I think the first part of our day when we come into work, when everybody's there, just chill into the day, feel it, and then let's get on. It's not about being in, get on it straight away. It's you've got to feel like you're in a space that will encourage you to explore, and yeah.
Wise words, Dr. Fowlestone. I like it. So,
Wow.
look, thank you so much for the insights. It's great having you on. We could do this for hours because there's so much in there.
Could.
But hey, what's coming up? What adventures have you got coming up that are exciting for you?
In a work world or in a
any world. I'm just wondering.
Well, I mean, work has gone really well for us. We've ended up winning 3 or 4 clients just before Christmas, which was really good. Out the blue as well. We threw our heart and soul into it, and that's great. For me, I would love to run, and which I believe will happen. I want to run another workshop in an amazing place like the Pyramids. For me, I just couldn't believe working class boy from Morecambe running 200 people, international brand people under the shade of the Pyramids, and I did it with the guy that I work with closely, and he's from a little mining town in Bathgate, and we just looked at each other going, wow, this is what how could this happen, the opportunities. So for me, I want to, for me and the people around me, is experience new places and new adventures associated with our work. I think that's the lights going out, Chris. I don't know if that's a sign.
No, I think we're still all good. I think the lights are still on. But look, I mean, I love the idea of more adventures. So look, if anyone's listening who've got some exotic briefs for Mark, he does amazing work, but obviously travels beautifully too. So let's put it out there.
That's it. And on a personal level, I've signed up for another marathon, and for about just when COVID hit, I took the biggest injury known to an office boy that tries to get fit. Yeah, I mean, the problem with running is that everybody thinks they're an athlete. Yeah, you go and spend £300 on trainers, but ultimately you sat on your backside all day, and that took its toll. And I ended up with an awful injury. And I've decided that this is the year of fitness again. And so I'm going to work my way up and try and get to where I was pre-COVID. And when Fee would say to me, Fee was the stimulus for this. She goes, "You got to do it." I was like, "Why?" She goes, "You're a much more happy soul when you are out running every other day." You'd wake up, you'd be moody as anything, down in 4 cups of coffee, and then you'd go for a run, and it was as if you'd been blessed with this spirit, right? And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely bang on. So I've signed up
Fee
again,
knows.
and I will. She does, yeah. She knows what it's like. But yeah, the joy of doing daily exercise is something that should be part of everyone's life. I don't know what it does. Well, there'll be a medical reason for it, but it opens you up so much, babe. It recreates a better you every single time. And every time I go for a run, I hate it, right? I hate it. Yeah. It's so painful. And then I come back and I'm just, transformed.
You never regret it, do you, Mark? Once you've been, you never regret it.
You never do. It's always there. And and we're able to do it. It costs you. You don't need to spend a fortune on trainers. I spent all this money on trainers, and I found an old pair of trainers I had from 1992, and they were just the same.
Well, there we go. So look, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Wonderful insights.
Always.
Really enjoyed chatting, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you in person soon. So look, thanks, Mark.
Well, I would love that, and I'm looking forward to diving into your freshwater pool, which is a blessing to anyone. So please keep me posted on that.
That keeps me sane. Go well, buddy. Big love.